Hey, stop whatever you're doing right now. Just for a moment, I want you to think about something. Think about the last time you truly felt like yourself. Not the version of you that wakes up exhausted, scrolls through the phone before even getting out of bed, feels anxious about things you cannot even name, and goes through the whole day on autopilot feeling like something is missing. I mean the real you. The version of you that laughs easily, thinks clearly, feels motivated without forcing it, and goes to sleep at night with a sense of peace. Do you even remember that person? Or has it been so long that you have started to believe this is just who you are now? Because here's something I need you to hear, and I need you to really hear it. Not just listen, but actually feel it. That heaviness you carry around, that foggy thinking, that pattern of self-sabotage, that cycle of starting something and quitting, that voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough, not smart enough, not disciplined enough. None of that is you. That is your brain. And your brain can be changed. Scientifically, practically, permanently. Welcome to Rewire Your Brain. Part 1. Your brain is not your destiny. For most of human history, people believed that the brain you were born with was the brain you were stuck with. Scientists, doctors, philosophers, almost everyone agreed that after a certain age, the brain was basically fixed. Like a computer that had already been programmed, and there was nothing you could do to change the code. And because people believe that, they also believe that your personality, your habits, your emotional patterns, and even your intelligence were essentially locked in. You were shy? Well, that is just who you are. You were anxious? That is just your nature. You struggled with focus or motivation or confidence. That was just your cross to bear. And here's the tragic part. Billions of people live their entire lives inside those invisible prisons. Not because the prisons were real, but because nobody had told them yet that the doors were never actually locked. Then something happened in the late 20th century that completely shattered this belief. Scientists studying people who had suffered strokes, brain injuries, and other forms of neurological damage noticed something extraordinary. The brain was healing itself. Not fully, not always, but in ways that should have been scientifically impossible according to everything they knew at the time. People who had lost the ability to speak were slowly regaining it. People who had lost movement on one side of their body were rewiring their neural pathways and learning to use the other side of their brain to compensate. The brain was not fixed at all. It was changing. It was adapting. It was growing new connections. And scientists gave this incredible ability a name: neuroplasticity. Neuro, meaning brain. Plasticity, meaning the ability to be shaped and reshaped. Your brain is plastic, not rigid, not fixed, changeable, right now, at any age, under any circumstances. And once scientists understood this, everything changed. Because if the brain can change after a stroke, it can change from repeated negative thinking. If it can grow new connections after physical trauma, it can grow new connections after emotional trauma. If it can rewire itself when it loses a function, it can rewire itself when you intentionally decide to build a new function. Every thought you think, every habit you repeat, every emotion you feel regularly, these things are literally shaping the physical structure of your brain. You're not a fixed being. You're an ongoing project. And the most exciting part, you get to decide what you are building. Part 2, how your brain actually works. Before we can talk about rewiring the brain, we need to understand what wiring actually means. And I promise I'm going to keep this simple and real because this is not a science lecture. This is your life we're talking about. Your brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons. 86 billion. That number is so large, it is almost meaningless. So let me give you a better picture. If you counted 1 neuron per second, it would take you over 2,700 years to count them all. And each of those neurons can connect to thousands of other neurons, creating a network so complex that it contains more connections than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. You are carrying the most sophisticated processing machine in the known universe inside your skull right now. These neurons talk to each other by firing electrical signals across tiny gaps called synapses. And here's the principle that changes everything. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Say it again. Neurons that fire together, wire together. This was first described by a psychologist named Donald Hebb. and it is one of the most important ideas in modern neuroscience. What it means in plain language is this. Every time you think a thought, feel an emotion, or perform an action, certain neurons in your brain fire together. When this happens repeatedly, the connection between those neurons gets stronger. The pathway gets wider. The signal travels faster. It becomes easier and easier for your brain to go down that same path again. This is why habits form. This is why emotions become automatic. This is why thoughts that you think over and over start to feel like facts. Your brain literally builds a highway between the neurons involved and then uses that highway because it is efficient. Your brain loves efficiency. It is always looking for the path of least resistance. This is beautiful when the neural pathways you're building are good ones. Confidence, calm, focus, creativity, kindness. But it is devastating when the pathways you're building are destructive ones. Anxiety, self-criticism, helplessness, negativity. Because your brain does not judge. It does not have a preference for whether the highway it is building leads to a good place or a bad place. It just builds based on repetition. Use it enough, and it becomes automatic. And this is why some people feel anxious without any specific reason. Their brain has built such a deep neural groove of anxiety that it now fires that signal as a default setting, even when there's nothing actually wrong. The anxiety was once a response to something real, but through repetition, it became a habit, a neural habit. The same way riding a bike becomes automatic after enough practice, worrying became automatic after enough repetition. But here is the most important thing I want you to understand right now. Because a pathway was built, it can also be rebuilt. Because a groove was formed, it can also be filled in. Not overnight, not without effort, but absolutely, completely, scientifically, undeniably, it can be done. And we're going to talk about exactly how to do it. Part 3. The architecture of your habits. Let us talk about habits, because the majority of your daily life is run by them. Researchers at Duke University found that approximately 40% of what you do every single day is not a conscious decision. It is a habit. 40% of your life is on autopilot. Think about that for a second. The way you make your coffee in the morning, the route you take to work, the way you respond when someone criticizes you, the snack you reach for when you feel stressed, the thoughts you automatically have when you look in the mirror. These are all habits. Patterns that your brain runs automatically to save energy. And every habit has 3 parts. There is the cue, which is the trigger that starts the whole process. There is the routine, which is the behavior itself. And there is the reward, which is the thing your brain gets out of doing the routine. This 3-part loop, cue, routine, reward, is called a habit loop. And once you understand it, you stop feeling like a helpless victim of your habits and start feeling like an engineer who can redesign them. Here is a simple example. You feel stressed at work. That is the cue. You reach for your phone and scroll through social media. That is the routine. You feel a momentary distraction from the stress. That is the reward. Now your brain has learned stress plus phone equals relief. And it will run that loop automatically every time it detects stress because it has been rewarded for doing so. But here is the key insight. You cannot simply delete a habit. The neural pathway does not disappear just because you decide to stop using it. What you can do is replace the routine while keeping the cue and the reward. Same trigger, same reward, different behavior. Stress happens, you take 3 deep breaths instead of reaching for the phone, and you still get a sense of calm. Over time, the new pathway gets stronger, the old one gets weaker, and the new behavior becomes the automatic response. This is not willpower. This is engineering. And the more you understand how your brain works, the less you have to rely on discipline and motivation, the 2 most unreliable sources of behavior change that exist. Motivation comes and goes. Discipline is exhausting, but a well-designed environment and a well-understood brain, those work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when you're tired and stressed and want to give up. Part 4. The enemy inside your own head. I want to spend some time on something that nobody talks about enough, and that is the voice in your head. You know the one. The voice that says you're not smart enough to try that thing you want to try. The voice that reminds you of every embarrassing moment you have ever had. The voice that tells you to play it safe, stay small, Do not embarrass yourself. The voice that says, "Who do you think you are?" every time you dare to dream a little bigger. In psychology, this voice has many names: the inner critic, the negativity bias, the default mode network on wild. But in real life, we just know it as the most relentless, exhausting, crushing companion we never asked for. And the terrifying part is this: most people believe everything that voice says. Your brain has what is called a negativity bias. This is not a flaw. This is actually a feature that kept your ancestors alive. The human brain evolved over millions of years in environments that were genuinely dangerous. And in those environments, the brains that paid the most attention to threats were the ones that survived long enough to reproduce. So your brain is literally wired to scan for danger, to remember bad experiences more strongly than good ones, to assume the worst, and to rehearse potential disasters. This was incredibly useful when the danger was a tiger hiding in the grass. It is not so useful when the danger is giving a presentation at work, or asking someone you like on a date, or starting new business. Your ancient, threat-scanning brain cannot tell the difference between a tiger and a hostile email from your boss. Both activate the same stress response. Both feel equally life or death. And this is why so many people are walking around in a constant low-grade state of anxiety, stress, and self-protection, because their brains are still running a program designed for a world that no longer exists. But here's what you can do about it. The first step is simply recognizing the voice for what it is. Not truth, not reality, not you, just a pattern, a neural habit, a program your brain runs automatically. The moment you create distance between yourself and that voice, the moment you can look at that thought and say, "There's my brain being anxious again," rather than, "I am an anxious person," is the moment you take your power back. In mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, this is called diffusion. You diffuse from a thought. You step back from it. You stop treating it as gospel truth and start treating it as one possible story among many. And when you do that, something remarkable happens. The thought loses its grip. It does not disappear immediately, but it stops running your life. The second step is something called cognitive reframing. This is not toxic positivity. This is not pretending everything is fine when it is not. This is looking at a situation from a different angle and asking, is there another way to see this? Because our brains are storytelling machines. We take raw experience and we wrap it in a narrative. And most of the time, we are not aware that we are choosing the narrative. We think we are just seeing reality. But two people can have the exact same experience and walk away with completely different interpretations. One person gets rejected and thinks, "I am worthless." Another person gets rejected and thinks, "That was not the right fit. What can I learn from this?" The event is the same. The neural pathway activated is completely different. And over time, the person who consistently chooses the growth-oriented narrative builds an entirely different brain from the person who consistently chooses the defeat-oriented narrative. You're not trapped in your story. You just need to become aware that you are telling one. Part 5, the science of emotions. Let us talk about your emotions, because most of us were never taught how emotions actually work, and that ignorance costs us dearly. We either suppress our emotions because we think feeling them makes us weak, or we're completely controlled by our emotions and make decisions we later regret. Neither extreme serves us. And the way out of this trap starts with understanding what emotions actually are at the biological level. An emotion, at its most basic, is a chemical signal. When your brain detects something, a threat, an opportunity, a memory, a social interaction, it triggers the release of chemicals. Cortisol when you're stressed. Adrenaline when you are scared. Dopamine when you anticipate a reward. Serotonin when you feel safe and valued. Oxytocin when you feel connected to someone. These chemicals flow through your body and create physical sensations: a tight chest, a racing heart, a relaxed warmth, a sick feeling in the stomach. And then your brain interprets those physical sensations and gives them a name: anxiety, excitement, calm, dread. The emotion you experience is actually your brain's best guess at labeling what is happening in your body. This is why the physical sensations of anxiety and excitement are almost identical. Racing heart, sweaty palms, heightened alertness, but feels so different depending on the story your brain is telling about the situation. One of the most powerful things you can ever learn is this. An emotion, when you allow yourself to fully feel it without resisting it, lasts about 90 seconds in the body. 90 seconds. Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, a brain scientist who had a stroke and spent 8 years recovering, was the first to really articulate this. She said that the biochemical lifespan of an emotion is about 1.5 minutes. After that, if the emotion continues, it is because you are re-triggering it with your thoughts. You are keeping alive. You are looping back to the thought that causes the chemical release, which causes the physical sensation, which your brain interprets as the emotion, which triggers the thought again. That loop is what anxiety disorders and depression often are. Not a single emotion, but a loop that has become automated. And the way to break the loop is not to fight the emotion. Fighting it gives it more energy. The way to break the loop is to feel the emotion fully, name it precisely, observe it without judgment, and let it pass. This is the foundation of emotional regulation. Not control, regulation. You cannot and should not control your emotions, but you can learn to work with them rather than being ambushed by them. And when you get good at this, you stop making fear-based decisions. You stop saying things in anger that you cannot take back. You stop eating for emotional reasons. You stop staying in situations that hurt you because the fear of change feels bigger than the pain of staying. You become, in the truest sense, emotionally intelligent. Part 6, the power of focused attention. Here is something that will change the way you use your mind forever. Where your attention goes, your brain grows. This is not a metaphor. This is literal neuroscience. The areas of your brain that you use repeatedly become stronger, denser, more connected. The areas you neglect become weaker, more pruned, less active. Scientists have found that London taxi drivers, who spend years memorizing the complex map of London streets, have physically larger hippocampus regions, the area of the brain involved in spatial memory, than the general population. Professional musicians have more developed auditory cortex regions. Meditators have thicker prefrontal cortex tissue, which is the part of the brain responsible for self-control, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Your brain is literally shaped by what you pay attention to. Now think about what most of us pay attention to on a daily basis. Social media feeds designed by engineers to keep you outraged and addicted. News programs optimized for maximum fear and negativity. Other people's opinions of us. Everything we have done wrong. Everything that might go wrong. Everything we do not have. Every way we are falling short. This is what we are feeding our brains. And then we wonder why we feel anxious, inadequate, scattered, and unsatisfied. We are literally growing the parts of our brain that process threat, lack, and comparison, while allowing the parts that process joy, creativity, connection, and calm to wither from neglect. Attention is the most valuable resource you have. More valuable than time. More valuable than money. Because attention shapes reality, your internal reality, which then shapes your external reality. And in the modern world, your attention is being fought over by some of the smartest engineers and psychologists on the planet, who are paid billions of dollars to capture it and hold it as long as possible. The ability to consciously direct your own attention, to choose what you focus on, is not just a productivity skill. It is a survival skill. It is the foundation of mental health, and it can be trained. This is where meditation and mindfulness come in. And I know some of you are rolling your eyes. I know some of you think meditation is for monks or for people who have way more time than you do. So let me reframe what meditation actually is. Meditation is not about emptying your mind. Your mind cannot be emptied. It will always produce thoughts. Meditation is the practice of noticing when your attention has wandered and gently bringing it back. That is it. You notice your attention has drifted to tomorrow's meeting or yesterday's argument, and you bring it back to the breath, to the present moment, to whatever you chose to focus on. And every single time you do that, every single time you catch the wandering attention and redirect it, you are doing a mental push-up. You are strengthening the neural circuits for self-awareness and attention control. Research from Harvard has shown that even 8 weeks of consistent mindfulness practice produces measurable changes in brain structure. 8 weeks. That is 2 months of 10 to 20 minutes a day. The return on that investment is extraordinary. Less anxiety, better focus, more emotional regulation, more creativity, better sleep, a genuine sense of calm that comes from the inside rather than depending on external circumstances. Part 7. The body and the brain. I cannot talk about rewiring the brain without talking about the body, because they are not separate things. The way modern culture has treated the mind and body as 2 different entities is one of the most damaging misunderstandings in the history of human health. Your brain runs on your body. It is fed by what you eat, oxygenated by how you breathe, regulated by how much you sleep, and chemically balanced by how much you move. And ignoring any of these is like trying to drive a car at full speed with a quarter tank of fuel, flat tires, and a cracked engine, and then being confused about why you feel terrible. Let us start with sleep, because it is the one that most people sacrifice first and understand least. When you sleep, your brain does not just rest. It works. It processes and consolidates the experiences and learning from the day, moving information from short-term memory into long-term storage. It flushes out toxic waste products that accumulate during waking hours, including beta-amyloid, a protein linked to Alzheimer's disease. It restores emotional regulation circuits, which is why things that seem catastrophic at 11 at night seem manageable in the morning. It repairs and grows neural connections. Sleep deprivation, and most adults in the modern world are chronically sleep deprived, impairs decision-making, emotional regulation, memory, creativity, immune function, and hormonal balance. And here is the cruel irony. One of the most common symptoms of sleep deprivation is feeling like you do not need as much sleep. People who are most sleep deprived are often the least aware of how impaired they are. 7 to 9 hours is not a luxury. It is the biological requirement for a functioning brain. Non-negotiable. Now let us talk about exercise, because the research here is so compelling it borders on miraculous. Physical exercise is the single most powerful thing you can do for your brain, short of actually treating a medical condition. And I'm not talking about running a marathon. I'm talking about walking. 30 minutes of brisk walking, 5 days a week. That is all it takes to produce significant improvements in mood, focus, memory, and creative thinking. Here is the mechanism. When you exercise, your brain releases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, sometimes called miracle grow for the brain. BDNF literally promotes the growth of new neurons and the strengthening of existing neural connections. Exercise also reduces cortisol levels, increases serotonin and dopamine production, improves blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, and promotes the growth of new brain cells in the hippocampus, the memory center of the brain. If exercise were a pill, it would be the most prescribed medication in the world. It treats depression and anxiety as effectively as medication in many cases. It protects against cognitive decline. It improves sleep quality. It builds resilience. It is free. It is available to almost everyone. And most people are not doing it. Please do not be most people. And then there is what you eat. Your brain is about 2% of your body weight, but uses about 20% of your energy. The fuel you give it matters enormously. Your gut and your brain are connected by the vagus nerve and by trillions of bacteria in your gut microbiome that produce neurotransmitters, including 90% of your body's serotonin. 90%. Most of your happiness chemical is produced in your gut. This is why what you eat directly affects how you feel. Ultra-processed foods, refined sugars, and inflammatory ingredients are linked to higher rates of depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline. A diet rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, healthy fats, especially omega-3 fatty acids found in fish, walnuts, and flaxseed, and fermented foods that support gut bacteria is one of the most powerful brain health interventions available to you. Food is information for your brain. Choose your information carefully. Part 8. The social brain. Human beings are not built for isolation. We are the most social species on the planet, more social, in terms of neural architecture, than any other animal. Our brains developed their extraordinary complexity largely in service of social living. Understanding other people, cooperating with them, competing with them, forming bonds with them, navigating the incredibly complex social hierarchies of human groups. This is what gave our ancestors the survival edge, and it is what our brains are fundamentally optimized for. And this is why loneliness is not just an emotional experience. It is a biological emergency. Research by neuroscientist John Cacioppo found that chronic loneliness is as damaging to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It activates the same neural circuits as physical pain. It impairs immune function, disrupts sleep, accelerates cognitive decline, and increases the risk of early death. Your brain literally needs connection the way it needs food and oxygen. This is not a weakness. This is what you are built from. But here is the nuance. The quality of your relationships matters far more than the quantity. You could be surrounded by hundreds of people and feel profoundly lonely. And you can have just 2 or 3 deeply genuine, safe, reciprocal relationships and feel completely held by the world. Harvard's 85-year-long study on adult development, the longest study of human happiness ever conducted, found that the single strongest predictor of health, happiness, and long life at age 80 was not wealth, not fame, not how hard you worked, not even your cholesterol levels. It was the quality of your close relationships. People who felt warmly connected to others at age 50 had the best physical and mental health at age 80. The loneliest people, regardless of their material success, deteriorated fastest. Love and connection are not soft, optional extras. They're the primary architecture of a good life and a healthy brain. And this means that the relationships you choose to invest in and the relationship patterns you carry are a serious brain health issue. Being in a chronically high-conflict relationship activates stress hormones constantly. Being with someone who undermines your self-worth rewires your sense of identity in damaging ways. Conversely, being in warm, supportive relationships actually regulates your nervous system. Simply being near someone you feel safe with lowers your cortisol. Their calm brain literally calms your brain through a process called co-regulation. We borrow each other's nervous systems. Choose carefully who you borrow from. Part 9. The Art of Deliberate Change. We have spent the last hour or so understanding the brain, how it works, how it forms habits, how it processes emotions, how it responds to the body and to relationships. Now it is time to get practical, because all of this knowledge is only as valuable as what you do with it. And what I want to give you now is a framework for deliberately changing your brain. Not a quick fix, not a hack, a real, sustainable, science-backed process for becoming a different version of yourself, the version you actually want to be. The first principle is this: start absurdly small. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive piece of advice I will give you, because when people decide to change, they almost always go too big. They're going to exercise every day, meditate for an hour, eat perfectly, read before bed, journal every morning, and stop wasting time on social media, all starting Monday. And then Tuesday, they are back to exactly who they were before, feeling worse than ever because they have added shame and failure to their existing problems. The reason this happens is because large behavior changes require large amounts of willpower, and willpower is a finite resource. It depletes throughout the day. It is lowest when you're tired, stressed, or making many decisions. Relying on willpower to build new habits is like filling a leaky bucket. It works for a moment, but cannot sustain itself. The alternative is to make the behavior so small that willpower is not required. Want to start meditating? Do not commit to 20 minutes. Commit to 2, literally 2 minutes. Sit down, close your eyes, breathe consciously for 2 minutes. That is it. Want to start exercising? Do not sign up for a gym and commit to an hour a day. Do 10 push-ups, just 10, every morning. Not because 10 push-ups will transform your body, they will not. But because 10 push-ups done consistently will build the neural pathway for being someone who exercises. Identity first, volume second. The size of the action does not matter as much as the consistency of doing it. The second principle is to design your environment before relying on your decisions. Your behavior is far more influenced by your environment than by your intentions. If there is a bowl of candy on your kitchen counter, you will eat candy, not because you are weak, but because your brain will execute the grab-and-eat behavior automatically when the visual cue is present. Remove the candy, and the behavior stops. It was never about willpower. It was about the cue. So design your environment to make good behaviors easy and bad behaviors hard. Put your running shoes by the door the night before. Put your phone charger in a different room so you cannot scroll in bed. Put a glass of water on your desk so you drink it without thinking. Put books where you use to keep your TV remote. The goal is to engineer your environment so that the path of least resistance leads to the person you want to become, not the person you're trying to leave behind. The third principle is to use the power of identity. There's a profound difference between saying, "I am trying to stop smoking," and saying, "I am not a smoker." The first statement is about a goal. The second statement is about identity. And identity is far more powerful than goals, because goals have an endpoint, but identity has no endpoint. It is who you are, and you behave consistently with who you are. Every action you take is a vote for the identity you want to embody. Every time you choose the healthy meal, you're voting for the identity of someone who values their health. Every time you open a book instead of your phone, you're voting for the identity of someone who values learning. No single vote wins an election, but enough votes do. And each vote also makes the next vote more likely, because your brain is always trying to maintain consistency with your self-image. Use this mechanism consciously. Cast enough votes for the person you want to become, and one day you will look in the mirror and realize you have already become them. The fourth principle is to embrace discomfort as the price of growth. Your brain is a comfort-seeking machine. It is always trying to conserve energy, minimize effort, and avoid pain. This was useful for survival. It is terrible for growth, because growth, real growth, happens in the discomfort zone. It happens when you do the hard conversation instead of avoiding it. When you stay in a workout when your body wants to stop. When you sit with the uncomfortable emotion instead of numbing it. When you keep going when the initial excitement of a new project fades and reality sets in. The brain actually grows in response to challenge. Neurons that are not challenged do not strengthen, they prune. Difficulty is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is happening. And the more you practice moving through discomfort rather than away from it, the higher your window of tolerance becomes, and the more capable and confident you feel as a result. The fifth principle is to prioritize recovery as seriously as you prioritize effort. In a culture obsessed with grinding and hustle, recovery has been branded as laziness. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the brain and body actually work. You do not grow during the effort. You grow during the recovery. A muscle is not built while you're lifting the weight. It is built during the rest that follows. Neural connections are not consolidated while you're learning. They are consolidated during sleep. The stress of the challenge creates the conditions for growth, but only if recovery follows. This is why sustainable high performance looks like working intensely and resting completely, rather than working constantly at medium intensity. The latter burns you out without producing the adaptation that makes you better. Sleep, play, stillness, time in nature, genuine social connection, doing things just because they bring you joy. These are not rewards for working hard. They are the biological requirements for the brain to process, consolidate, and grow from the work you have done. Part 10, Stress, Trauma, and the Resilient Brain. I want to take a moment to talk about something that many people carry but few talk about openly, the weight of difficult experiences. Some of you listening to this have been through real things. Not just the ordinary challenges of life, but genuinely painful, genuinely hard experiences. Loss, betrayal, abuse, failure, trauma. Things that left marks not just in your memory, but in your body, in your nervous system, in the way you move through the world. And if that is you, I want to say something directly. What happened to you matters. How it affected you is real, and you deserve to heal. not just to cope, to actually heal. Here is what we know about stress and trauma from the perspective of the brain. When you experience something threatening or overwhelming, your brain activates the fight or flight response. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, fires a distress signal. Stress hormones flood your body. Your prefrontal cortex, the thinking, reasoning part of your brain, goes partially offline because in a genuine emergency, you need to act fast, not deliberate. This is a beautiful, life-saving system when the threat passes. The stress hormones metabolize, the nervous system returns to baseline, and you are okay. But when the threat is chronic, ongoing stress, repeated exposure to trauma, a childhood environment that never felt safe, the stress response stays activated. The amygdala becomes hypersensitive, firing at smaller and smaller triggers. The prefrontal cortex stays partially offline, affecting decision-making, emotional regulation, and the ability to think clearly. The body stays in a state of low-grade emergency. And this is what we call a traumatized nervous system. But here's what I need you to know. The brain that trauma has rewired can be rewired again. This is the most hopeful, most important thing science has discovered in the field of trauma treatment in the last 30 years. Neuroplasticity does not discriminate. It does not say this pathway was created by trauma, so we cannot change it. It says, and use pathways weaken, use pathways strengthen, full stop. Through experiences of safety, connection, therapy, mindfulness, movement, and sometimes medication, the traumatized brain can build new pathways. The amygdala can be calmed. The prefrontal cortex can be brought back online. The nervous system can learn that the danger has passed. This is not just possible. It has been demonstrated in laboratory studies, clinical trials, and in millions of lived human experiences. Healing is real. It is not fast. It is not linear, but it is real. And even beyond healing from trauma, there's a concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. The idea that some people, through the process of grappling with genuinely difficult experiences, emerge with a deeper understanding of themselves, a greater appreciation for life, a more authentic sense of values, and a resilience that they could not have built any other way. This does not mean suffering is good. It does not mean you should be grateful for the painful things that happen to you. It means that the human brain has an incredible capacity to find meaning, and that meaning-making is itself one of the most powerful rewiring tools we have. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust and later wrote about the psychology of meaning, observed that those who found meaning in their suffering, not because the suffering was deserved, but because meaning could exist alongside it, were the ones who maintained their psychological integrity in conditions that destroyed others. Meaning does not erase pain, but it transforms the relationship between you and the pain. And that transformation is everything. Part 11. Your brain on gratitude and joy. Let us talk about one of the most underrated neuroscience discoveries of the last 20 years, and that is the profound effect of gratitude on the brain. I know gratitude has become something of a cliché. Journaling every morning, writing 3 things you are thankful for, and maybe that has caused you to dismiss it as soft or superficial. But the neuroscience underneath, it is anything but superficial. When you practice genuine gratitude, not going through the motions, but actually pausing to feel the warmth of appreciation for something real in your life, several things happen in your brain simultaneously. Your brain releases dopamine and serotonin, 2 of the primary neurotransmitters involved in mood regulation and well-being. Your prefrontal cortex activates, which helps regulate the amygdala and reduces anxiety. Your default mode network, the part of your brain that tends to ruminate and run negative, self-referential thoughts, quiets down. Your body shifts from a sympathetic nervous system activation, which is the stress response, toward parasympathetic activation, which is the rest and digest state where healing, creativity, and genuine well-being are possible. And when you do this practice consistently, say every evening before sleep, your brain begins to scan for positive experiences more automatically throughout the day because you have literally trained it to look for them. Remember the principle, where attention goes, the brain grows. Train your attention toward what is good, and your brain will become better at finding good. This is not denial of difficulty. You can hold both, the hard things and the genuine beauty, simultaneously. Mature gratitude is not naive. It is the ability to find the real gifts that genuinely exist inside a complicated, imperfect, beautiful human life. And then there is joy. Not happiness. Joy is different. Happiness is often a reaction to circumstances. Things going well, getting what you want, pleasant experiences. Joy is deeper. Joy is a felt sense of rightness, of aliveness, of being fully present in your own experience. And crucially, joy can be cultivated deliberately, even in difficult circumstances, because joy is less about what is happening and more about your relationship to what is happening. Research by neuroscientist Rick Hansen found that positive emotional experiences need to be held in awareness for at least 15 to 30 seconds before they begin to make a meaningful neurological impression. Because of the negativity bias, your brain is inclined to let positive experiences slide off like water and let negative experiences stick like Velcro. The practice he calls taking the good is simply this: when something genuinely good happens, no matter how small, pause. Notice it. Stay with it. Let land. Let yourself actually feel it, not just intellectually note it. A beautiful morning, a moment of genuine laughter, the feeling of your body moving well, the warmth of a good cup of tea, a conversation that felt real. These moments are everywhere, but without intentional attention, they pass without leaving any trace, while the frustrations and disappointments accumulate. Flip the script. Train your brain to hold the good long enough for it to become part of you. Part 12. The creative brain. One more piece before we bring this all together, and that is creativity. Because creativity is not a gift that some people are born with and others are not. It is a brain function. And like all brain functions, it can be understood, cultivated, and dramatically expanded. Your brain actually has distinct networks that operate differently during different types of thinking. The default mode network, sometimes called the imagination network, is active when your mind is wandering, daydreaming, or thinking about yourself and others. The executive control network is active when you're focused on a specific task, making decisions, and controlling your attention. And the salience network is the switching mechanism that moves you between the two. What is fascinating about highly creative people is not that they have more of one network or another. It is that they have stronger connections between these networks, and they are better at switching between focused and diffuse thinking. Creativity requires both. You need the focused thinking to evaluate and refine ideas, and you need the diffuse, wandering, associative thinking to generate the unexpected connections that are the raw material of creative insights. This is why your best ideas often come in the shower, on a walk, or just as you're falling asleep. In those states, your focused attention relaxes, your default mode network activates, and your brain starts making associations between things that seemed unrelated. It is not magic. It is neuroscience, and you can deliberately create the conditions for this to happen more often. By building walks without headphones into your day. By letting your mind wander without immediately reaching for your phone. By sleeping on problems rather than forcing solutions. By exposing yourself to a wide range of ideas, experiences, and disciplines. Because creativity is fundamentally the ability to combine existing things in new ways, and the more raw material you have to work with, the richer your creative output. And by believing you are creative, because this matters far more than most people realize. People who believe they're creative look for and act on creative ideas. People who believe they are not creative dismiss and ignore the same ideas as not meant for them. The neural pathway of creative confidence, once built, makes the creative process feel like flow rather than force. Part 13. Bringing it all together. We have covered a lot of ground together. We have talked about neuroplasticity, the fact that your brain is changeable right now, at any age, under any circumstances. We have talked about how habits form, how the habit loop works, and how to redesign habits deliberately. We have talked about the inner critic and the negativity bias, and how to create distance from the automatic stories your brain tells about who you are. We have talked about emotions, what they actually are at the biological level, how long they last, and how to feel them without being controlled by them. We have talked about the incredible importance of sleep, exercise, and nutrition for the brain you live with every day. We have talked about relationships and how profoundly the quality of your social connections affects your mental and physical health. We have talked about the principles of deliberate change, starting small, designing your environment, embracing identity over goals, befriending discomfort, and honoring recovery. We have talked about trauma and healing and the extraordinary capacity for post-traumatic growth. We have talked about gratitude, joy, and creativity as brain functions that can be consciously cultivated. And underneath all of it has been one unifying message, one core truth that I hope you will carry with you long after this audiobook ends. You are not stuck. You are not your history. You are not your habits. You are not your diagnosis. You are not your worst moments. You are not the voice in your head that tells you change is impossible. You are a human being with a brain built for adaptation. A brain that has survived everything you have been through so far. A brain that, even in this moment, is changing in response to the new information you have taken in. Right now, as you process these ideas, neural connections are being formed. Something is shifting. Something that was not here when you started listening is here now. That is not a metaphor. That is biology. And what you do with it in the days and weeks and months that follow is the most important question in your life. I want to close by telling you something personal. The people who transform their lives, not the ones who read books and feel inspired for a week and then go back to their old patterns, but the ones who actually change permanently, profoundly, they share one thing in common. Not intelligence, not perfect circumstances, not even unusual levels of willpower or discipline. What they share is a decision, a real, deep, felt decision that says, I am done living like this. I am done running the same patterns and expecting a different result. I am done being a passive passenger in my own life. I'm going to be the author of this story, not just a character that things happen to. That decision, that moment of genuine commitment, is itself a neurological event. It creates a before and an after in the brain. And everything after that moment, every small action taken in alignment with that decision, every moment of discomfort moved through rather than away from, every night of good sleep and morning of movement and genuine connection, all of it accumulates. Slowly, invisibly, magnificently, your brain rewires. And one day, and you will not be able to point to the exact moment it happened, you will notice that the old thought patterns do not have the same grip they used to. That the old behaviors require a conscious effort that they no longer automatically receive. That you feel, in some quiet but unmistakable way, like a different person. Like the person you always knew you could be, underneath all the noise. That is what rewiring your brain means. Not perfection, not the absence of struggle, not a state where everything is easy, but a fundamentally different relationship with your own mind. One where you are the architect rather than the prisoner. And you can start that work today. Not Monday. Not when your circumstances change. Today, with one small step, one conversation, one boundary, one healthy meal, one walk, one deliberate breath, one moment of choosing the thought that serves you rather than the one that shrinks you. The brain you want is built one decision at a time. And you have everything you need to build it. Right now, today, this moment, right here is your before. Everything that comes next is your after. You have the power to rewire your brain. Now go use it. And that brings us to the end of today's audiobook, Rewire Your Brain. If this resonated with you, if even one idea here shifted something inside you, then you know what to do. Subscribe to Bite-Size Book English. Because every week we bring you the best ideas from the best books, distilled into the most powerful, most real, most human version possible. Hit that like button right now. Not for us, but as your first vote. Your first vote for the person who is done just consuming information and is ready to actually use it. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because the people in your life who are struggling with the same patterns, the same heaviness, the same quiet feeling that something needs to change, they deserve this too. Drop a comment below and tell us, which part hit you hardest? Which idea are you going to put into practice starting today? We read every single one. We are a community here. And if there's one thing we know from everything we have covered today, connection is everything. We will see you in the next one. Keep going. The brain you want is already being built. This is bite-sized book English. Stay curious. Stay consistent. And remember, every moment is a chance to begin again.